All right, so welcome to another deep dive with us.
Yes.
And today we're going to be exploring something I think a lot of us are familiar with, but maybe haven't really thought about too deeply.
Right.
And that is communion.
Yeah.
The source material that we're looking at today is this text called Rule d'eau.
All right.
And we're going to be zooming in on a particular passage in 1 Corinthians 11.2326.
Okay.
Which talks all about the significance of communion.
Right.
So get ready
Yeah.
for some aha moments as we uncover a fresh perspective on this ritual.
Well, one of the most intriguing things about this passage is that it's believed to be the earliest recorded account of the Last Supper.
Really?
It actually predates the Gospels.
So this is like
Yeah.
closer to the source.
Closer to the source, exactly.
Wow.
1 Corinthians was written around 55 AD.
Okay.
Well, the earliest Gospel mark is estimated to have been written between 67 and 70 AD.
Wow. So we're getting a glimpse then into how the very first Christians understood this.
Exactly how they understood and practiced it.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so fascinating.
Okay, so what does this passage then tell us about the meaning behind communion?
A key word here is akenoto,
Okay.
which translates to remember or commemorate.
Okay.
It's not just about passively recalling an event. It's about actively recalling and reflecting on Christ's sacrifice.
And that ties into the actual elements then. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just any bread
You're absolutely right.
we're talking about here.
The bread used during communion connects back to the Passover meal Jesus shared with his disciples.
Okay.
The mentioned in verse 24, refers to the unleavened bread, or jenna,
Right.
used during Passover.
Got it.
Both Passover and the Last Supper use unleavened bread as a powerful symbol.
Okay.
For the Israelites, it represented freedom from slavery.
Right.
For Christians, it represents freedom from sin through Jesus.
Okay, so there's that parallel there.
Exactly.
Of the bread representing freedom.
Yeah.
But freedom on kind of these two different levels.
Right, different levels, yeah.
But then the passage also talks about a new covenant
Yes.
established through Christ's blood.
Right.
So to even understand that, I guess we have to back up and be like, what is a covenant?
What is a covenant? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Think of a covenant like a contract,
Okay.
a binding agreement with responsibilities on both sides.
Like a lease?
Exactly like a lease.
Okay.
You agree to pay rent.
Yeah.
The landlord agrees to provide a habitable space.
Right.
Both sides have obligations.
Okay. Got it.
So how does that apply to the Bible?
Yeah.
Well, in the Old Testament, God established a covenant with the Israelites through Moses.
Okay.
God promised to be their God, and they promised to follow his laws.
Right.
It involved animal sacrifices and blood, symbolizing the seriousness of the agreement.
It's like a really, really
Serious contract.
serious contract.
We got it.
Okay, so what happens if one of the sides of that covenant is broken?
Well, the Israelites actually struggled to keep their end of the agreement.
Okay.
They strayed from God's laws and worshipped idols.
Right.
And that's why the prophet Jeremiah spoke of a new covenant
Okay.
in Jeremiah 31.31-33.
Okay.
One that wouldn't be broken like the old one.
So that's kind of where this 1 Corinthians passage is picking up then.
I'm picking up that thread.
Is it saying that that old covenant is just like
Obsolete. Obsolete.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's not that the old covenant becomes irrelevant,
Okay.
but rather it's fulfilled and transformed in the new covenant,
Got it.
established through Jesus.
Right.
The new covenant is no longer about following rules perfectly to earn God's favor.
Right.
It's about accepting God's grace through faith in Jesus.
Yeah.
It's accessible to everyone who believes, regardless of their past.
So the cost is incredibly high.
Yes, but it's covered by him.
By Christ, not by us trying to earn it.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
And 1 Peter 1.80-30-19 highlights this beautifully. It says that Christ's sacrifice wasn't with something perishable like silver or gold, but with his own precious blood.
Right.
The price was immeasurable,
Wow.
and it made God's grace available to everyone.
We've gone from unleavened bread
Yeah,
to ancient covenants
that's right.
to the sacrifice of Christ.
It's all connected.
I can't wait to see where this deep dive takes us next.
Me too. This is fascinating.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So this brings us to a really crucial point about this new covenant. You know, it's not just about receiving forgiveness.
Okay. So it's not
That's
just
transformation.
get out of jail free card.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not just about wiping the slate clean. It's about becoming a new creation. Our source material highlights 2 Corinthians 5.14-15 and verse 17.
Okay.
It talks about the love of Christ compelling us, motivating us to live differently.
So we're not just legally forgiven. It's like we're given a whole new operating system.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
The old way of living focused on selfish desires is replaced by a life centered on Christ.
Yeah.
And this isn't about rigidly following a bunch of rules.
Right.
It's about allowing the transforming power of Christ's love to shape our hearts and actions.
I think that's where a lot of us get tripped up. You know, we go through the motions of communion, but then kind of go right back to living our lives as if nothing's changed.
You've hit on a really important point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the challenge is bridging that gap between the ritual and the reality.
Right.
Communion isn't just a symbolic act we perform.
Yeah.
It's meant to be a catalyst for a transformed life.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap?
Yeah, how do we live this out?
Of compartmentalizing? How do we actually live out the transformation that communion points to?
One way is to really reflect on what we're remembering during communion.
Okay.
We're not just remembering an event from the past.
Right.
We're entering into the reality of Christ's sacrifice and what it means for our lives right now.
It's like taking it out of the history books and into our everyday lives.
Exactly.
Remembering that we're not just forgiven, but called to live differently because of what Christ did.
Yes, and the connection to the Old Covenant we talked about earlier becomes even more significant here.
Okay.
Remember those blood sacrifices?
Right.
They were a constant reminder of how serious the covenant was.
Right.
And the consequences of breaking it.
Right. Those sacrifices weren't just symbolic. They were a powerful, tangible representation of what sin cost.
And in the new covenant, Christ becomes the ultimate sacrifice, taking on the full weight of our sin.
Right.
Communion helps us remember that sacrifice, the cost of our redemption.
Wow. That gives a whole new meaning to remembering.
It does.
It's not just recalling a story, it's grappling with the magnitude of what Christ did for us. That's heavy stuff.
It is. And that weight, that profound awareness should motivate us to live lives worthy of such a sacrifice.
Yeah.
It should drive us to love others, to seek justice, to actually embody the character of Christ in our everyday actions.
So this is way more than just a theological concept.
Absolutely.
It's about experiencing real transformation.
Exactly. And that transformation comes directly from the new covenant established through Christ's sacrifice.
Yeah.
It's a covenant of grace, mercy, and the power to become more than we ever thought possible.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've learned so much about the origins of communion, its connection to the Old Covenant, and the powerful implications of the New Covenant for our lives.
And this is just the beginning.
I know.
There's always more to explore, more to discover about the depth and richness of this ritual and its power to transform us.
I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, what's one key takeaway that's really resonating with you right now?
For me, it's the understanding that communion isn't just passively remembering.
Okay.
It's actively participating in the ongoing reality of Christ's sacrifice and the transforming power of his love. It's about allowing that love to shape not just what we believe, but who we are.
That's so powerful. It's not just about what happened then, it's about living it out now. I think that's such a crucial point, you know? It's so easy to just go through the motions of communion without really grasping the weight of what it represents.
That's where our source material's emphasis on remembering kind of comes full circle, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about mentally recalling an event. It's about letting that remembrance transform us,
Right.
shape the way we live our lives.
So it's like taking all these layers of meaning that we've unpacked, the historical context, the symbolism, the concept of covenants, and letting those infuse our experience of communion.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond just the ritual and into a deeper understanding of this profound mystery we're participating in.
Yeah, it makes me think of how we often say, "This is my body broken for you" during communion.
Right.
Those words just take on a whole new meaning when we consider the depth of Christ's sacrifice and the reality of the new covenant.
You're absolutely right. It's not just a phrase we recite, you know.
Right.
It's an invitation to enter into the very heart of God's love for us.
Yeah.
A love so deep that he gave his own son for our redemption.
This deep dive has given me so much to think about. It's like I've always known about communion, but now I'm seeing it with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
What about you? What stands out to you the most?
I think what's striking me is the realization that communion isn't just an intellectual exercise.
Okay.
It's an invitation to a deeper, more meaningful experience of faith.
It's about connecting what we know in our heads with what's happening in our hearts.
Exactly. And that brings us to a final thought for you to ponder as you continue on your own journey of discovery.
Okay.
We've explored the historical and theological context of communion.
Yeah.
But what does it personally mean to you?
Right.
How does understanding its origins affect your experience of this ritual?
That's a great question to leave us with. We've laid the groundwork, but now it's up to each of us to take these insights and apply them to our own lives.
This deep dive is just a starting point. The real journey begins as we take these truths and allow them to shape our hearts, minds, and actions.
So as we reflect on the significance of communion, let's not just remember the past, but allow it to fuel our present and shape our future. May this deep dive inspire us to embrace the transformative power of Christ's love and live lives worthy of the sacrifice he made for us.
And may we always approach this sacred ritual with a sense of wonder, gratitude, and a deep desire to allow its meaning to permeate every aspect of our lives.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper into the mysteries of faith.